Hello and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, smash the subscribe button. Now, motorcycles are really cheap to run. However, they do need maintenance. Now, one of the things with motorcycles that comes quite frequently is most definitely oil change. Now, if you're thinking you just swap the oil out and then you just pour more in, you'd be forgiven, but you're totally wrong. Now, the issue is you need an oil filter because the nasty bits of crap that are inside your engine that get put through the filter are going to stay there if you just put new oil in. So there are certain things that you are going to need. First off, you need to research what oil goes in your bike and how much oil. So for instance, we're going to do my Zontes and not my Sinis, but believe it or not, they're very similar. Now, my Zontes runs on 10W40 or 10W50. I prefer 10W40 for the simple fact it thins out a little bit quicker when you start the engine up. Now, I'm using Castrol Power One Racing. It's not a brand that I'm sponsored by or anything like that. I just decided I'm going to get some quality oil for my engine because quality means longevity. So also alongside that, you have to make sure you get the oil filter that is actually for your motorcycle, because whilst motorcycles are cheap to run, maintenance costs and servicing at a dealership is bloody extortionate. Another thing to note and mention is if you're lubricating the engine, have an idea about lubricating your chain as well, because 9 times out of 10 you need to lubricate your engine but you're forgetting entirely about your chain. So again, not sponsored, but just lube your chain. So just a quick little tip is one of these little items. It's a chain lubing brush. It honestly really cheap, cost me about a £5, but it's a really handy tool to have and it'll especially save your fingers. So pro tip. Now with the Zontes, it might not necessarily be exactly how your engine is like, because between 125s and 310s and anything in between, they all have a different way and method of being put together. But for the most part, it's very similar, and you can sort of gauge what you need to do just by actually taking it apart, and then you'll know the way that it needs to be put together. So don't take my Zontes as a gospel. It's just how I'm going to work and do it with the Zontes, and how very similar and alike it really is to doing it with any other single cylinder engine. So here with an air cooled, you can see the top circle is actually the oil filter cover. Down at the bottom you've got the sight glass, which is brilliant. If you have one of these on your bike, it makes life so much easier. Now this is actually the Keyway RKF 125. Now as you can see here, there's an extra component on the side of the engine, and that's because this bike is water cooled. But the one at the top, the small one with the 3 bolts on it, that is your oil filter cover. To the left hand side there's a bigger circle, and that is actually your clutch behind that one there as well. So when you take a look at the Zontes, the big one there behind that is my clutch. The one with the hoses leading to it is my water pump, and this time around my oil filter is actually below. So as you can see, between all these engines, they're very similar. The only difference is with the air-cooled one, you don't have a water pump. So hopefully that clears out a few things to what you're looking at. So without any further ado, we're literally going to start off and get the job done, because I'd like to go and ride my bike, to be quite frank. First thing you need to do is make sure that the engine oil is lukewarm. Now the reason for that is it becomes thinner and it drains out a lot easier. So I recommend running the engine for about 2 to 3 minutes just before you decide to do your oil change. So after leaving it for running a little while, obviously the engine's going to be a little bit warm. So make sure you haven't left it going for a long time, but ideally once it's nice and warm, that's when you want to start doing the work. So over here we're going to undo my dipstick that's on this one. Normally you'll have a sight glass on a 125. When you do that, you can undo your oil filter as well, and by doing that you're going to end up letting some air get into the engine, so when the oil wants to actually vacate, it doesn't have a vacuum and you can get all of it out at the same time. So loosen it off on this side. Right, so obviously with this bit, it's got a nice extension that you can lead to. The drain plug on this bike is over here. Normally on a 125 you actually find it directly under. Right back there. And obviously make sure you've got a bucket. And ideally you want to use gloves, but I don't have any. Spilling everywhere. obviously again put that somewhere so you're not going to get covered in dust. And for the time being, you just got to wait for all that oil to come out. Right, now over to this side. Right, once that's all been done, you then basically want to undo your oil filter cover. I can hear it coming out even more on the other side now. This bit wasn't well thought out of by daunties.
Yeah. Fuck's sake.
That's why I wore these shit jeans.
Good thing too, though.
Yeah, that's why I went back in to get changed. Yeah. Oil filter, tuck it in there, and definitely be prepared with a cloth. Use a clean cloth and you can get a last little bit there, but make sure that is a clean cloth. Alright, so you get rid of the old gasket because you don't want that. Or in this case here, replacing it just over like that, nice and easy. So try and get any other little bits of oil that are a bit dirty, but using a clean cloth. And then you need a new oil filter. Obviously with this one here, it says outside towards filter cover, and this little bung goes in there like that. Might be wrong.
It sound right, boy.
Winner chicken dinner, there you go. I think that was easy, Dan.
Yeah, we got there.
Oh, yeah. The principle of theory versus practicality. A lot of pressure on the spring.
Don't drop it in the oil.
No, definitely not. Ideally, take the belly band off. As always, a very good thing to remember that a garage will do it in half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. However,
4 times.
yeah, it'll cost you a bloody fortune. Remember, don't over tighten them. You just need a nice little firm twist so they won't vibrate off. And that is your oil filter done. The next thing to do is clean off your dipstick. You don't want any of that dirty old oil. And just place it there lightly and loosely for now. Now, sometimes you'll have a magnet that is attached to your sump plug, and that is for any little bits of shards of metal that might end up going towards the engine, but it gets stuck with the magnet to keep it out of the way. So always give that a good clean. And make sure you put the sump plug back in before you decide you're going to start doing the oil. And I recommend, again, nice and firm if you don't have a torque wrench, so it's not going to vibrate loose, but it will definitely stay in place. And then wipe the garage floor. You're bound to get a spill here and there. Pull it up.
Look like it.
No, yeah. Alright, so you pull it up and it comes out just like that. Now the next thing you need to do is get over to back to that dipstick again. Now this bike needs 1.2 litres of oil. So I'm going to start off by basically putting half in first. And then I'm going to put the dipstick back in. And then you have to start her up. You need to let her run for just a couple of minutes, if that. A couple of revs gets it going. Alright. Now the reason for that is because the oil filter is gonna suck up a whole bunch of oil. So if you were to put 1200 straight in, you wouldn't really know if you're at the right level or not. And it gets the oil everywhere that it needs to be and back flowing, and that's when you can add the rest of the oil. Now you've got a little, on the oils you'll always see that there's levels exactly here as to how much oil is in there. If you're at 1 litre, then you know here I need to put just that smidgen, a little bit more. Put the lid on it, because that excess on this one will do me for another time. Basically, you need to dispose of your old oil, and the best way of doing that is putting it back in the old pot and then taking it to your local garage. And they might ask you for a little bit of money, but in general they usually tend to be alright. Obviously, last things that you want to do is get your dipstick back in there and then tidy up anything with spillages. Even your tools could probably do the clean. Make sure you do that and let the bike settle for just a little minute, and then run the engine quickly, level the bike off, and then check on the dipstick as to where we are. Get a nice little level. Right. Yeah, about halfway, innit? Let's do that once more. Yeah, so that's about fine then. Sweet. So as you can see, motorcycling doesn't need to be super expensive. Now, maintenance between these bikes is usually about 2,500 to 3,000 miles every time you need to do an oil change. I'd say after every 2 or 3 oil changes, I would possibly go into the looking at your air filter, your valve clearances, your coolant levels, and just basically make sure that everything works how it should do. You can download lists of what a full motorcycle service is, and you can obviously YouTube and find out exactly what it is that you need to be doing for your specific bike. But hopefully this really helped, and I'm hoping that it might even take a little bit of an edge of worry off as to doing your own oil changes. And as you can see, it's not super difficult. In fact, you don't even need a super amount of tools. You could even go into Poundland and buy the tools, because you aren't actually taking anything that is super strenuous off. So if you like this kind of content, please smash the subscribe button, give it a thumbs up, and yeah, help the channel grow just a little bit. But until next time, ride it out.